some examples from the last class, 3 different projects of first their initial prototype and then their redesign. So the redesign is not due until the end of the semester, but this gives you an idea of the process that we're going through for your prototypes. So you can understand kind of the level of detail that I'm asking. I also have posted good examples from this class. If you're one of these groups, congratulations. There's actually a few other groups as well, but some of the files I had a hard time opening or things like that. So, of course, people are Skyping with me in the middle of class. So take a look at these as you are in the process of doing your revisions to get an idea of what quality work looks like. Obviously, none of these are perfect, but this gives you a standard by which to say, okay, this was a good level of detail, a good concept, and so forth. Okay. And then today, we are down here. We're at week 10. Today, we're going to go over chapter 5. On Thursday, we're going to have an in-class group work assignment, so you guys can start working on your prototypes. Hopefully, you've already started, but this will be some in-class time to work on it. And then your optional revision is also due on Thursday. Okay? So let me go ahead and start the lecture.
You work with the
Thank you. I just forget. I just leave it on all the time. The worst is when my mom decided for the first time ever she was going to call me, and she just kept repeatedly calling me over and over again in the middle of class. I know, I should have answered, like, hi, Mom, talk to my class. She still doesn't know what I do for a living, so, you know. You try to tell her you do research, and she's like, oh, you're a teacher, that's all right. I was like, what do you do the rest of your week? That's what you get in my profession. Okay, let me get this to work. There we go. All right, so some reminders from last time. Remember last time I pushed back your revision due date to the 17th to give you some more time to work on it. So go ahead and get started with that. What's that? I believe the 17th is a Thursday, right? Okay. So what I'm going to do is on the 17th, when I have 100% of you in class instead of 25% of you, I'm going to ask how everybody's revisions are going, and I may give an extension, but don't count on it because I want you to start working now. Okay? And then the other thing is, if I give you an extension on your revision for your documentation, I still can't extend your prototype. So the problem with giving you an extension on this is that you'll spend all of your time at the last minute working on this and then not put in the effort for your prototype. Is that, what do you guys think?
It's just the initial prototype.
What's that?
It's just the initial.
It's the initial, but your initial prototype is the one that you're doing your video demo on. So that means that the video demo is going to be what's showed to the entire class. So you don't want your initial prototype to be subpar work. You want it to be like a good, finished, polished design because you're doing your video prototype on it because you're getting 2 grades, one for 20% for your initial prototype, but then a project grade for your video demo.
Just a little bit for the revision, just a little bit, because I mean, we started.
I know you guys just came back from spring break, and the last thing you wanted to do was work on your revisions.
No, I'm saying just for some.
Okay. So class here on Thursday, I'm going to ask that again. But I was thinking of not even mentioning it today, so you actually start working on it now if you're doing a revision, because I know the tendency is, well, if I extend the deadline, then you're going to wait to work on it. But you should also be getting your initial prototypes done. And when I say initial, that doesn't mean give me some crappy drafty work. Your initial prototype you should treat like your final work, because then we're going to improve on it to make it even better. Okay? All right. So chapter 5, we're going to be talking about direct manipulation in virtual environments. First, I want to give you a little bit of feedback on your PD1, or your project documentation. About a quarter of the class made A's. So congratulations. Those groups did a knockout job, and they really followed the user-centered design process where I looked at their questions, and they actually listened to their users and came up with a really unique and cool idea that they documented really well. The rest of you fell somewhere else. And so here are some of the common mistakes that I saw on your project documentation. And I realize you have lots of feedback, right? Because you have at least 5 different students who gave you feedback on your project, and those tended to be a lot more positive than the feedback you got from the TAs or myself, right? So when you're addressing the feedback in your revision, number 1, who's the most important person for you to make happy in this class? Me. Okay, treat me as a venture capitalist who would be funding your app. I'm the one that you have to convince that this is a worthwhile project to pursue. Okay? So I put my feedback in the rubric from the TA under that quality metric. Okay? So all of it's lumped there. If you're one of the groups that had major issues in your design concept, you should probably consider coming to see me, because those design issues aren't just going to go away if you try to wish them away. You need to come up with something to transform your idea into something good. Okay? And then what's the most important feedback? The TA? No, users, that was a great answer in the real world, but in the class, TAs will be the next most important to make sure you're addressing their comments, because guess who's going to be grading the revision assignments? So how much time do you think they put into grading your assignments? Like one of the TAs, 2 TAs graded. One TA told me how long do you think she would work on? Just for her, for all of the projects.
Most likely 6
She
hours.
worked probably a good solid 40 hours giving you guys feedback. So you probably have more feedback on this assignment than you've ever gotten on any assignment at UCF, right? So how do you think the TA will feel when he or she goes to regrade your assignment, and they put all that effort into giving you that feedback, and they get something that didn't listen to that feedback at all? Do you think your grade is going to go up significantly? Okay. So the key is to make sure that you're legitimately addressing their feedback. It's okay to disagree in some instances, but you have to justify that in a reasonable and rational way, with external citations, with quotes from your users. If I tell you something like, you didn't show me that this idea was novel, you can't just say, well, we think it is, and we're moving forward. You need to address that feedback in a substantive way. Okay? So some of the common mistakes is did not reflect the user-centered design process. And I knew that this was going to be a problem because I have a room of technologists, right? And so the first time any of the groups came up to me, you all started with your features. We want to design an app that does this cool thing. And what did I tell you? What does your user need? Okay? And some of you took that advice and flipped it around, and you ended up designing an app that was completely different than what you set out to initially design. And that's called design process because you're following the user's needs. Some of you, however, had an idea, and all you did in your user study was use that to confirm your initial idea and move forward instead of listening to the other problems that you could potentially address for your users and justifying it based on that. Sometimes that panned out if your idea was unique and novel and feasible and useful for the user based on your user interviews. So sometimes you left out and the two collided. Other times, I looked at your assignment and said, why did this group even do a user study? Because it's really not reflected at all in the app that they're designing. Okay? And so when that happened, you had issues like lack of novelty, lack of usefulness. And then from a technical perspective, some of you had issues with feasibility. A lot of your apps require this enormous knowledge base of information that has to be accurate. And in some cases, it's life-critical information, like information about medications or supplements, or information about resources to get help for people. And if these things aren't up to date, then your app's going to be useless. Okay? So it's not it's more that you didn't justify the feasibility in your write-up. I'm not always, like to some of you I said, you need to rescope, right? Like Sarah, in your app you said, we're going to do an app that helps students with disabilities learn how to read, and we're going to do a discussion forum for teachers to help them teach students how to read. That, right? What was my feedback? Do you remember? They did good. But I said that you should consider rescoping because in one app, you don't necessarily need to have two user classes that are so different. You might have one app for teachers and another for students, or an app where the teachers use it to enter in the examples that can be used for students. But you wouldn't want to have one app that does both. Think about what the market description would be for that on the Android Play. An app for students to learn how to, with disabilities, to learn how to read, and for teachers to, you're split marketing, right? So a lot of you, I told you to narrow your focus. And then some of you, I told you, look, your idea is not novel. There's tons of apps that already do this, and you can't compete just on user interface. Because what did I tell you before about UI? It is, and it's easy to change very quickly, right? Okay. All right. Another thing is I read some of your documents, and after reading the whole thing, I was still like, I'm still not exactly sure what your app actually does. Okay? And that's a communication issue, because you need to be able to clearly communicate with your users or your investors or your bosses that this is the key value of our app and this is what it's going to do. Especially if you're going to the next step, which is prototyping. What the heck are you going to prototype? Okay? Some of you, I said, you have too many features. You're saying we're going to do this, 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 and this, and it's like, okay, and if you should say. Narrow it down to a few closely related, high-value features that you can bring to your user that make sense. Okay? Again, the flaws in the main design concepts, even on your in-class participation assignments, I said, is this app going to be useful to your user? Is it novel based on what the competition's already doing? And is it feasible? Can it be done? So I looked at those three things for all of your projects. A lot of you had very short sections, maybe like 1 or 2 sentences for each section. And you left me hanging on the, well, how are you going to do this? Or why are you doing this? So I oftentimes said that this section is underdeveloped. That's what I mean. Okay. Did not follow instructions. Like for instance, if you just gave me a list of interview questions without a rationale for why you were asking those questions, you got some points taken off. Or for instance, instance, if I said, please give 2 personas, and you didn't open up the narrated lecture slides to figure out what a persona was, and you just gave me some bullet points, is that a persona? What's a persona?
Actually creating a character.
Yes. So if I didn't see like a Bob is 35 years old and he's doing this, I knew that you didn't actually understand what a persona was. Okay? Again, the minimal effort level, if I looked and opened up a document and I said, you know, all of this work that's presented here could have been written by probably 5 students in a matter of 3 days, because there's really, I just don't see the effort. I saw a lot of projects like that. Some of them were completely missing entire sections of their document. Okay? And then, what I didn't understand is the groups that did really well on the assignment were the ones who submitted the extra credit. And the ones who didn't do so well are actually the ones who didn't submit the extra credit. Well, I don't understand this, but I know that this is typical in a classroom. Yes? I don't know off the top of my head, but the general comment from the TAs was the students, the groups that really needed the extra credit didn't do it at all. Okay? Right. So all of these C's could have been easily bumped up to B's or A's. Okay? The D's could have easily been bumped up to C's or B's.
Just from posting the audio recordings?
Just doing it, having a decent length audio recording of all your interviews. Okay? So remember, you have the opportunity to improve your grade with the optional revision assignment. If you have not opened up that, if you're one of those BCDs, if you have not opened up that revision assignment yet, do it today. Read it, become familiar with it, start an action plan. If you want to stay with the same project manager for consistency, you're welcome to do that. Or I recommend that you assign a new project manager based on your experience from the last deliverable, somebody who you think would be a strong project manager to help you get the revision done. Okay? Because you're going to have to concurrently be working on your initial prototype, which is going to have a different project manager. And the key thing is that your documentation and your prototypes, we're kind of doing the agile methodology of software development here, right? Have to be aligned. So you can't be developing your prototype based on your old idea if your project documentation is being updated to transform the idea into something better. So this is how a project team works in the real world. You have concurrent things going on at the same time and keeping the communication lines open so that when I look at your prototypes and I look at your revisions, they match up, right? Okay? Alright, and this is just me ranting. So web courses is really bad, and I apologize. So there are a few things that I've seen as reports from students. For instance, for your peer review, some of you actually opened up the rubric and submitted the comments and saved, but then web courses, for some reason, not telling you there was any error, didn't save the rubric. So what I've told the TA to do is for your peer review and making sure that the other team got your peer review, grade it based on you uploading that document, not on the rubric itself. Okay? The other thing that was an issue was that some students accidentally uploaded the wrong document to web courses for the wrong group. Did any of you have that problem?
Double checking because I couldn't remember after I closed it.
Right. It's hard. Imagine how it is from the TA's and I side on having 30 groups managed. Well, and it's okay because we all make mistakes, right? Well, web courses is designed badly because once you put a comment, what's the problem? You can't delete it, you can't edit it, it's just there. So you just have to post another each student gets 2 peer reviews. So let me randomly sample from this thing and give them to each student. So that meant that some people got their own group. Some people got 2 people from the same other group, and so forth. And so the TA had to go in and manually revise that to get rid of those discrepancies. So each student had 2 reviews to do. The unintended consequence of that is that the balancing across the 30 groups was uneven.
Oh, okay, so it's like if I click on the rubric, I can see multiple people's names, but then there's only 2 columns that have documents attached.
Then they might not have read the directions.
Oh, okay. But well, I was wondering if that's because like they were assigned with someone else in my group that other person got the
It's
copy.
possible. I didn't look into that yet. So if you ask the other people in your group to see if that's the case. So what she's saying is that some of you might not see everybody else's peer reviews because web courses might only show those reviews to the individual that the peer review was assigned to. Like remember where you're doing a review for a group, but it was assigned by the name of a person?
Yeah.
So you might only see 2. Your team member might see 2 others. Another team member might see 2 others, and so forth.
What's really confusing about it is that, like I said, in my other rubric, I can see multiple people.
So you can see the rubric, but you can't see the documents. Okay. So keep in mind that there might also be exercise work in web courses. So in future semesters, I will probably do this process way differently because I was hoping that this feature in web courses was designed intuitively enough to allow you to do group work peer reviews. But it wasn't.
For individual assignments.
Which, for the most part, that's what web courses was designed for.
Right. But if you did a proper task analysis, you would see that classrooms also need to do group work.
Yeah, but
Right?
at that point, you probably turn it on paper, so
Well, maybe.
well,
Yeah.
most people do. So
Right. So it's one of those things where I've worked with other course management systems like Moodle, and they do things differently. So this is just to show you that a task analysis and understanding how people need to use the software that they're using really makes a difference. Yes, Joe.
For clarity, like, the groups are supposed to then have 7 reviews total?
So
Like from the
you have feedback from me, from the TAs, and some variable number of other students. Because we weren't able to evenly balance it across all groups. So that would have taken probably a week just to figure out the spreadsheet to do that. So contact all of your team members. Make sure that you have all of the feedback from the students visible for all of you so you can review it together. Okay? All right. And then the other thing is when we're grading, I actually get this message saying, oh, well, if you leave comments in the document when you're using Firefox, they're not always going to be saved. And it's just like, do you think that's an acceptable design decision to saying, you know, it's just going to be inconsistent. We're not going to tell you when it's going to be saved successfully or not. So I started out, like, your group, you see comments in your document. After your group, I decided, okay, I can't use this anymore because it lost half of my comments. So realize that the process of grading isn't very user-friendly for me or the TAs. But we tried to get the feedback to you to be as high as quality as possible and as timely as possible. So please keep that in mind. All right, so now we're going to be talking about Chapter 5 on direct manipulation. So why do you think this chapter on direct manipulation would be important given the author of the textbook?
He's like the head guy that comes up with that.
He's the guy who pretty much championed the whole idea of direct manipulation. And so when he wrote this book, he actually included it as the first chapter of the different types of interaction techniques. If you notice, I presented all these chapters in reverse order, with direct manipulation being the last one, because it doesn't make sense for me to talk about direct manipulation and like 3D virtual interfaces before I talk to you about command languages. Okay? So keep in mind the importance of this chapter in the context of the author, and it's really a chapter where he's trying trying to sell his work. So you'll notice when you read, there's going to be a lot of self-references in this chapter. So what are some signals for user acceptance? Being able, not having to have instructions to learn how to use it, being able to perform the task well, ease in learning and assimilating to advanced features, because we might not know the advanced features right away, but we at least should know how to do some simple functionalities off the bat, right? Confidence and capacity to retain mastery over time, meaning if you leave it, can you come back, like riding a bike, which I really hate that metaphor because I'm really bad at riding a bike now. Enjoyment using the interface. Are there any interfaces that you just enjoy using? Video games, okay. Eagerness to show off the interface to others or to novices. Have you ever told somebody, hey, you really need to check this app out?
Nope.
No? TurboTax. Do you do mobile TurboTax? No? That's how we just submit our taxes. Definitely. Right? So when something works really well and makes your life easier, you get excited about it, right? Because the one resource that we have a lack of is what? Time. Right? That's the finitely confined resource that all humans have. Time. Scarcity of time. And then also the desire to explore the more powerful aspects. So these are some of the key signals for user acceptance. And the reason I bring this up is that Schneiderman's argument is that direct manipulation is directly correlated to being able to increase some of these user acceptance signals. So, direct manipulation interfaces. It's kind of a misnomer because when you say direct manipulation, you kind of think of direct input, like the touch pads or the light pens that we talked about in the interactive devices. But that's not what the author is talking about when he talks about direct manipulation. He actually uses the principle of virtuality, which is a representation of reality that can be virtually manipulated, okay? To be able to have a feeling of involvement directly with the world of objects rather than communicating with an intermediary. Okay, so here's an example. What's the difference? So what's the metaphor when you want to throw away a file?
Rock something.
Right, bringing it to the trash, dragging it, dropping it in the trash, right? So if we were doing this through like an intermediary, being like a menu, how would you do it? Right. Right. So it was actually pretty novel when they first like kind of introduced the whole idea of dragging and dropping, right? People like the idea of dragging and dropping, especially if they're novices, because it's like this tangible almost thing that they can grab a hold of and do something. And as time has progressed, we're even getting closer and closer to more directly manipulating objects instead of kind of like the whole virtual type of file. What's an example of manipulating objects directly, Joseph?
Like taking files from one folder, dragging and putting into another.
Dragging and dropping files to different folders. How about on your phone? What about the phone? Travis?
Just after scrolling.
Scrolling, yeah. Scrolling is the direct manipulation because it's this physical object that's kind of like a window right? Right. We want to be able to have a natural interaction with it, with something that we would expect to be able to do with that object. Nathan?
Yeah. Some people are talking about like students, we not calling out style, but like real objects is visually amplify that.
Right, and that's exactly it. Like having an amplifier or like a volume control even on your computer, it looks like a little like speaker thing and it has like a slider. Right? So having some kind of visual representation of things from the real world. So some examples of direct manipulation. For instance, in word processing. Early word processing is called command languages only. You might only see one line of text at a time. I actually had this Smith Corona typewriter, and it was so cool. What you could do is you could type like a whole paragraph of text, and it would show the first 2 lines of it in the window up there. See that? And then you would push like the key, and then it would type that whole paragraph out on the piece of paper. I was so freaking excited when I was like in middle school.
So you can backspace?
Yeah, so you can like backspace on this like little window up here. And that was really cool at the time because before that, all you could do was pen peck, right? And then have to delete like, and then like they came up with things like being able to use the white tape in the typewriter to be able to erase a whole word at a time. This was my life. Like, can you imagine having to live that life today? Because we're so used to WYSIWYG editors where our document in Microsoft Word looks exactly the same on our screen as when we print it on the printer. Usually, depending on the view that we use, right? So, word processing is now WYSIWYG. What was WYSIWYG again? What you see is what you get. So we have like a rich text editor here, so when you highlight a word and make it bold, it goes bold. Unlike markup languages like HTML where you have to put like the bold tags around it. So that's not direct manipulation because you're using markup language to say, okay, this word's going to be bold when it's rendered. In direct manipulation, what you're doing, the WYSIWYG, is what's going to be rendered already. Okay? You see that difference? So it's only in times like when you're computer science or IT or CE majors where I see a lot of students who reject programs like Microsoft Word in favor of the more programming language type interfaces. Anybody use like Emacs or LaTeX? Yeah, instead of Word? Yeah?
Yeah.
Do you use it for pretty much everything, or?
No, it doesn't require it. I prefer Word, but some professors want the fact.
Right. So a lot of my colleagues, when I go to write a paper with them, I find out that they'll only write a publication using LaTeX. And I'm just like, oh, right. Because I'm a visual thinker, and I want to see what my paper is going to look like as I'm writing. I was really bad because I was one of those students in my English classes where I wrote to my final draft. And you know how English teachers always wanted you to do a first draft and then revise it. So I would actually do my final draft and then make mistakes and like go backwards because that's just how I wrote. Which is kind of how I write now in Word. Okay. So some of the advantages of being able to have this WYSIWYG interface is being able to see a full page of text at one time, things we take for granted. Ability to see how documents look printed without even having to print them. Cursor action is visible and natural. Like you know where your cursor is, you know if a word's highlighted, you know where you are in the document. Labeled icons help users perform tasks faster, like being able to do any of the formatting tasks. Visibility and feedback can be maximized. So we know if we perform an action, if it works or if it doesn't work. And we have easily reversible actions, such as being able to do Control-Z. Oops. Direct manipulation has also come to the world of spreadsheets. So the first electronic spreadsheet was VisiCal in 1979, which is, by the way, the year I was born. Harvard business student wrote this, and it looks something like this. Is that the kind of spreadsheet you're expecting to look at today?
Yes.
Kinda. It's similar, but the difference between this, I think there was like some kind of programming you had to do to update the different cells and everything. You couldn't just click on the cell in Excel and type it as done. Okay? So this was more just like almost a way of displaying the output and then having to manipulate it. But we now come to the point where we can directly input formulas. We can drag and drop and use wizards to be able to create graphs and charts. And we have all of these tools available to us to be able to do number crunching in this direct way. So Microsoft Excel is obviously the current leader. Does anybody else use any other spreadsheet applications?
Yes.
What?
Mostly OpenOffice, not super off the word.
Okay, all right. Fair enough. So there's also like Google spreadsheets and others.
That's good.
Right? Did I just give your example? Okay. All right. So we can do things like create graphs, do what-if analyses. Yes? Vim. I don't know what that is. Lively Emacs. Okay, so there's different programs available out there, and we definitely have some market leaders, but then we have others that people use because of their level of preference, or because it was required for a class. We also have direct manipulation when you think about spatial data and visualizing it on maps, right? So what are some of the mapping applications that you've used? Google Maps. Has anybody used Google Earth?
Yeah.
Okay. There's other more specialized programs like ArcGIS where you can actually take city data and overlay information on it, such as a crime map, or here, I think this is a traffic map of Universal. Here's the Orlando crime map if you're ever buying a house and you're interested in figuring out the crime in your area. And so all of this is like, we've become very accustomed to being able to pan and zoom maps on computers, right? In fact, the new iPhones have what? The first interface for 3D maps on your phone to be able to pan and zoom and look at 3D maps. I haven't seen it yet. Has anybody seen it? But we're going in that direction because maps are a big way that we like to interact using technology. You have a question?
Is that the thing where you push in? Like the harder you push?
Yeah, so something like that, where being able to use pressure to do that z-axis.
Yeah.
Yeah, good memory. All right, there's also video games. This is probably one of the first things we think about when we think direct manipulation. I remember my first video game was called Wishbringer. It was completely on command line, and it could probably fit in like 15K space these days, right? It was one of those, you are standing in a town square, you have a mad dog on one, and you have this on the right. What do? And you had to say, turn left, turn right, give dog bone, pick up bone, things like that. Right, and you're just like, oh, I can't do that. And you almost feel like a sense of accomplishment just because it's recognized one of your commands. But now what do we have? An everyday video game. I don't even know what that is. Just so everyday. Is that what that is? Yeah. World of WoW, right? World of Warcraft. I can pretend I know what it's about.
Graphics?
But we have very high level fidelity graphics where we're in these virtual worlds, and a lot of the video games are first person, right? Where like you're kind of at the screen. No? Not anymore?
All of them.
Okay, so
You can have a choice now.
oh, okay. So what are the choices called?
There's first person and third person.
Third person. Okay, so you can be first person or third person. So you see how you're directly kind of like manipulating if you're the first person, because you don't say turn left anymore, you just turn left, right?
Yeah.
That's direct manipulation. Okay? It's one of the most successful applications in video games, use of 3D virtual reality. Controllers are becoming even more realistic. For instance, we have this dangerous object now, which is a tennis racket Wiimote. Has anybody in here broken anything or hit somebody with a Wiimote before?
No.
I have.
I love the whole idea
tossed their remote into the TV and broken it.
Like, hold it better. That sounds like a person.
So, the good thing about these video games is they don't require complex syntax, thus they have very little need for error messages. Like, when's the last time in a video game, during being immersed in the world, there was an error message?
Yesterday.
Other than when it crashed.
Yesterday.
What happened?
I was playing a.
Like, if it's not an error, like as in like a fatal error of memory.
I was playing Far Cry Primal, and I got a Uplay message that brought up an entire interface that was completely different from the game, and I was like, oh.
Is that like a wormhole or something?
No, it's a part of the interface for their special proprietary software. They're like on the cheap end, and they're like, oh, let's bring up this whole thing that gets away from the entire game entirely. I'm like, great.
So like, the error message that I can think of is they built into the game. I used to play Gauntlet Legends 2. Am I too old? Does anybody remember that?
I do.
So I was always the green elf. And I always loved when like Valkyrie shot the food. Because you're obviously not supposed to shoot the food. So they built that error message into the game. Valkyrie shot the food. And then you got your BFG out. Anyway. And so the shot your food is almost like a type of error message because you're not supposed to do it. So what do video games do more now? It's like they don't let you shoot the food, right? Or like they don't let you accidentally walk through a wall. Like they don't give you an error message if you've gone too far and you're walking into a wall. What usually happens if you're a video player and you go to a wall like this and you keep going. You just kind of keep going like this, right?
Yep.
See a wall. Okay. So direct manipulation helps reduce the need for error messages because there's like a physical confine that actually prevents you from doing certain things. And this is all for your entertainment, so you're allowed to laugh. Okay. It's also useful for education games. We've seen a lot of video games now with gamified learning. But there are some limitations. For instance, for task applications, you can't game to learn for everything. Right? If you're writing a term paper for college, you don't want to put that in the environment of a video game to try to be able to complete that task because it's almost too distracting and unpredictable. And you just want to just focus on your task, get it done so you can go play your video games. Right? There's also computer-aided design or CAD. Anybody use any CAD programs? Okay? What do you model? Architecture stuff? I know your name, but I don't remember it. No, before I know you. Jerry. Engineering. Alright, so there's engineering software. So being able to build automobiles, circuitry, aircraft, mechanical engineering, architecture, etc. Would we want to have to do this in the physical world as we're developing or designing something new? Or is it easier to do something like this virtually? So we can, like, at will say, you know, I want to change this panel. Right?
I was actually looking up one thing about my phone, their design called shatterproof design. They would actually do virtual simulations on the materials or actually choose one material to make it and then start drawing phones instead of wasting
Right. So companies save a lot of money by doing virtual design now, and even virtual testing before they start building real world projects. Okay. There's also a lot of personal uses for computer-aided design, such as interior design, landscape design, fashion, and style. I know that I brought myself into one of these little things to go put like a different hairstyle on. I brought that to the hairdresser. It didn't look anything like what the picture I brought her. We've also, my husband and I bought a landscaping software package. It was probably like $200, and he was able to draft the elevation of our house and put in completely new landscaping and do different models to say, okay, I want this one or not that one. Have you used anything like that? Once you get a house, you probably will start doing that. Sherwin-Williams painting app, where you can actually snap a picture of your room and try to like figure out the colors for it. There's also other applications like personal finance. What's the virtual object that's modeled in a program like Quicken? This is Quicken here. So this right here, it has the payee and the amount and the date and that type of information.
The
It's
checkbook.
a lot like a
It's a checkbook.
checkbook. Exactly. Very good. So that's the virtual metaphor. And then here, up here of your past transaction history looks a lot like your what? If anybody ever did this, it's your ledger for your checkbook to be able to reconcile it. Right? So we didn't go too far from, your grandparents are still writing checks, being able to upload all this information. And the best thing that ever happened, like I used to use Quicken back before all of the banks connected to it. So what did I have to do? I had to manually input every $3 I spent to be able to keep my account balance up to date. That was a real big pain. But now, all of your banks connect to programs like Quicken and download all your transactions and help reconcile them for you. So it's almost automated. So it tries to have an intelligent interface where it looks at the payee and like if it's Publix, it might say automatically groceries, or it might use your past category that you chose for a particular payee. But sometimes it does it poorly and you have to add your own category. And then when you use your own category, then you can look at the graphs of, oh crap, I spent $2,000 on eating out this month. Right? All software you should look into. Budgeting is a great thing to learn in college because you don't have all of the financial problems that you'll have once you graduate. Okay. Airline reservation systems. A lot of them have calendar pickers or where you can click on where your destination is instead of typing in the number. There's video manipulation. For instance, this. Where do we get that kind of interface from?
VCR.
Right, a VCR. Like one of the very first video technologies you probably maybe not even had.
I did.
I had a VCR. I still have a VCR. All right, so here this is a direct manipulation interface because you move this slider, what happens? It's pens, right? If it were a volume one, it might do something, but this one looks like, well, if you go this way, it will advance the video, right?
It's the one at the top.
Oh, it has the top one for.
That's for the video. The one at the bottom is the sound.
The volume.
Yes.
Right. So see, I'm still trying to learn these interfaces. I still can't deal with my remote at home. We have one of those Logitech Harmony 890 ones that cost like $1,000 something bucks. And I usually just push something and I'm just like, it didn't work, and I hand it to my husband. Alright, anyway. So, and then we're very big on dashboards these days. Being able to use a dashboard with red, yellow, and green meaning what?
Good, middling, and bad.
Right. And so what is a dashboard modeled after? Like a car dashboard, right? So we use this from anything from stock tickers to especially if you're like a systems admin, you might have a dashboard to monitor all the networks and the traffic. Okay. So what I'm glad this author did is instead of just touting the benefits of direct manipulation, he actually did address some of the problems. So I like that. One, direct manipulation isn't good for people who can't see, right? Because if you can't see to manipulate something virtually, then it's not going to be helpful for those people. It consumes more screen space because it might require additional scrolling because if you're modeling the whole interaction of a trash can, you actually have to physically have that trash can somewhere on the screen, right? Some additional tasks such as pattern recognition benefit from more compact tabular displays. So if you're a cybersecurity professional and you're trying to look at just you probably don't want a direct manipulation interface to do that. You might want to just see, Excel spreadsheet of, oh, there's a pattern of where this variable in the data set's going up to risky limits or something. Okay? Users also have to understand what the object means. Just because we use a virtual visual metaphor to model something in technology, that doesn't mean that the metaphor was good, right? One good way to mitigate this is using a text-based title. For instance, for icons, having a brief thing of text underneath to let people know, hey, this is what this icon means. Also, in different cultures, different objects for different cultures look different, right? Can anybody give me an example? The example that I give here is mailboxes. I don't know if my internet's working. Okay, let's say that it's not working right now. So around the world, mailboxes look drastically different. However, what looks fairly similar from one country to the next? An envelope, right? So when we send an email, do we often see a mailbox or do we see an envelope? An envelope, right? So you have to think about what metaphor makes sense for the interaction that you're trying to achieve. More problems. The visual representation may be misleading. Users can draw incorrect conclusions about what's permissible and what's not by overestimating or underestimating the extent in which that you're using that metaphor. We talked about this early on in the class. Somebody had the great idea of, well, if I'm telling my mom that Windows Explorer is a lot like a filing cabinet, some of the assumptions that she might make are that you can only put like a certain number of files within a folder, right? But that isn't necessarily the case, right? With more of a limit to your hard drive, but we don't want to explain that to my mom. Okay. For expert users, it may actually slow their speed of being able to do task completion. For instance, Michael prefers hitting delete on a file than dragging and dropping it into the trash can. Because for intermediate or more advanced users, we know these keyboard shortcuts that maybe somebody who's a novice wouldn't know. For small screens, occlusion problems may occur because if you're trying to visually represent a whole bunch of objects on a little screen, unless it's something like a map, it's very difficult to do. Choosing the right metaphor is not easy. And you don't want to mix your metaphors, right? You might not want to have like a thermometer metaphor and a, I don't know, and like, what's another metaphor we can come up with?
A gas gauge, maybe?
A gas gauge, right? One's like this and one's like this. And you are trying to measure like two things like in a fundraising app or something. So you might not want to have two different types of metaphors. You might want to stick to one consistent one. Thank you. That was helpful. You also don't want to use negative metaphors. Like you don't want to explain bandwidth for networks to a novice individual, such as it being similar to a sewage pipe. Right? In some ways it is, right? Because the bigger the pipe, the more bandwidth. The smaller the pipe, the less bandwidth. And then you're distributing things from place to place and it's a network. But who wants to think about network bandwidth in terms of sewage? Yeah, probably.
There's a lot of junk on the internet.
Right. And so you try to use positive metaphors whenever possible. And then lighter weight web technologies may not be interactive enough. We're seeing a shift because we're seeing more things like dynamic HTML, Java, Flash. But generally, users don't like these things. Like how many of you, for security reasons, have turned off Java in your browsers? Right. Okay. So the more interactive technologies are also putting us at larger security risk, and so we're kind of turning this off. So some of the inherent weaknesses of web pages means that, okay, on a web page, it's going to be hard for you to drag and drop and manipulate something unless there's some kind of embedded thing, right? It's typical HTML. Alright, so some principles of direct manipulation. One is continuous representation of the objects and actions of interest with meaningful visual metaphors. And I actually gave you a screenshot of my own interface here just to give you an example. What do you think this app does? Yeah?
Yeah, track their baby activities.
Right, so I can actually figure out how many, like I don't use this anymore because my kid's like 16 months, but you can track when they eat, you can see if you can see your left side or your right side, you can decide if you pumped on your, it is actually really important for any women who've had kids and breastfed in here. It becomes really uncomfortable if you don't keep track of things like this, right? So here you can say, okay, when's the last time I fed my baby, right? You can figure out pumping when kids poop or pee, right? So, and what do you think this one means? The green one. That's actually a toggle for sleeping. When you push it, it turns red, and so you can record if they're sleeping or not. And so it has this really cool timeline feature. This is called Baby Feed, that you can look at, and you can see how your life is completely consumed by this little person that you just had. Okay? So, but what this is showing you is that they had to choose visual metaphors. And in fact, after I downloaded this app, they actually changed their metaphors. Their little poop used to have a smiley face on it. I guess they thought that was too cutesy, and they removed it. So, like things like this, somebody looks at these and they're like, I don't know what those are, but if you're a pumping mom, you know what they are, right? Another thing is like the crib. Like if they did something like putting Z's above it, you might make it a little bit more clear that it's for sleeping, right? So think about your icon set and what the visual mapping users are going to make to that semantic, what does this mean and what will it do if I click it, okay? Simple actions are presses of label buttons instead of complete complex syntax. So here, if I wanted to say that my baby was sleeping, all I had to do was hit that widget. I didn't even have to open up an app or put in a time or do anything other than push a button. Who has time for that? Rapid, incremental, reversible actions whose effects on the objects of interest are visibly immediate. So when you do something, it records it, and it shows you that you recorded it. Okay? There's also beneficial attributes where novices can learn basic functionality quickly. Probably in 5 minutes, you could at least do some of that functionality of that app pretty quickly. Experts are not inhibited by the design because they can find ways to do it without maybe the more novice interface. Error messages, again, are rarely needed if you have a very intuitive interface that handles those exceptions well. Immediate feedback so that users can reverse counterproductive actions. That app is probably not the best example because, like, if I accidentally pushed a button, I'd have to open up the app and then go delete, like, the recording. And then users gain a sense of confidence and they feel in control. Because they're like, yeah, I got this. I can figure out how to use this. So this chapter also gives you some good guidelines that you should take a look at when developing your prototypes because icons are a big thing for mobile. Use graphic icons with a textual description. For instance, I always get confused and think that snakes are chasing my car with this sign. And then here, the do not enter has the text as well, right? Represent the object and action in a recognizable manner. Like, ask somebody who's not you, if you clicked on this button, what do you think it would do? You'll get very valuable feedback doing that. Some of you didn't even give me icons, but those of you that did, I looked at some of them and I'm like, okay, this icon's too complex, or I'm not sure the difference between what would happen if I click on this icon or this icon. Okay? You want contrast, where you make the icon stand out from the background. You don't want it to look like an image on the page. You want it to look clickable. State, you want to provide a visual cue that has been selected. For instance, that sleep button that was either green when I could push it or red when I was stopping it. Make icons distinctive from one another. Don't give me two icons that are just a little bit different, and you know why they're different, but your user doesn't. And then make your family of icons harmonious. Like, for instance, if you have rounded edges on one of your icons, maybe make your whole icon set like that. If your icons are round, make all of your icons look like that. Don't have one in a low fidelity that looks like a cartoon and another one with a high fidelity that looks like a photo. They need to be consistent across your icon set. And then decide best design for movement. For instance, if you're going to have things like sliders or cards that you can switch between, or buttons, figure out how your user is going to interact. Okay? With mobile, there's a lot of things that are slide, like the pulling down to refresh. And then there's some top 10 mistakes for icon design. Graphic designers, please take a look at that article. If you think about it, we're actually now moving towards using direct manipulation interfaces for programming. For instance, when you write a query in a database, do you drag and drop the relationships to do joins? Or are you actually writing the SQL statement of inner join table dot field name equals table 2 dot field name?
Writing.
So
That's the class.
right. So in the class, that's what you learn. Guess what people in industry tend to end up doing? Jerry. Right, like they're moving away from more of the relational database. They are. But we're doing more of this rapid application development, and a lot of developers are using things like Visual Basic or Visual.net, right, platforms, where you basically just drag and drop a form, put a button on it, double click on it, you get the code behind, and you can write the logic for that code. So we're moving a lot more to like dragging and dropping interfaces even for programmers. Probably not in your classes because we're still old school and want you to learn how to do math before you use calculators. Alright, so
Math lab is terrible.
So direct manipulation in virtual environments, because this is really where it's going, is more novel, immersive environments. Some of the benefits is that these environments, they try to make them be better than the real world. Like, if your video game was like just like SimCity, which some people like SimCity, where you're just building like your own whatever, like people aren't necessarily as interested in stuff like that that's real world as like going off and like killing a whole bunch of people or flying or doing things that we as humans can do, right? Those tend to be the more viral games, the ones that you're doing something that you would never do in the real world. Like, I'm an awesome bowler on the Wii. So they enable superhuman or at least better than human capabilities. And this applies to things like even medical imagery and architectural drawings. Like if you were an architect and you were just drawing it out on a piece of paper, you probably wouldn't come up with the best design as you are if you're using a CAD program. It also gives you the ability to manipulate objects at will without the danger and costs involved in the real world. Like for instance, if you were Airbus and designing the next airliner, would you want to be doing that without CAD? But there are drawbacks because these virtual environments are often not appropriate or practical for accomplishing everyday tasks. Like for instance, other than the video gamers in here, when's the last time you used some kind of virtual reality environment? Because wasn't there this point when we thought like the whole world was just going to be like virtual reality and we're going to plug into Matrix?
That was mostly when the Matrix came out.
Yeah. Why hasn't that happened?
Because it's very pricey and a lot of people making stuff aren't really that great at it.
Sad. So bad designers. But also, it's not cut out for the tasks at hand. Right? And it's possibly because these technologies are too immersive, right? Because we have enough to do in the real world that trying to do it in a virtual real world to get it done in the real world is actually pretty stressful. But 3D interfaces are good. They try to simulate the real world in all three dimensions, definition of 3D. But the problems might include that they create disorientation, or there's issues with occlusion. What's occlusion? World and the Alien Adventure one where they like put water on you and it's the alien like breathing on you. Anyway. And these 3D interfaces can be very successful, especially in video games. So some design guidelines that the book goes into. Again, here's the laundry list. Use occlusions, shadows, perspective, etc. carefully. For instance, if you have text in a 3D environment, you probably don't want to simulate that text in 3D. Go ahead and leave that in 2D, right? Avoid clutter and distractions, because if you have too many objects, they become obstacles. Simplify user movements to keep them realistic. People don't like walking through walls, unless that's what the game's about. Also prevent errors, for instance, by only allowing actions that are performed on relevant objects, like don't let Valkyrie shoot the food. And then you want to simplify the object movement. Like for instance, there's only a certain subset of movements that a first-person character can do, right? That are confined to what a human person would be able to do generally, right? Or at least like some amazing human person could do. Unless like it's a zombie game and you can take off your head, that's okay. I don't know, right? Advanced guidelines for 3D design is provide overview so users can see the big picture. So this is kind of the bird's eye view where if you're kind of doing the first person, that you kind of get disoriented, so you can view pan out, say, okay, this is where I am, and this is where I need to go. Allow teleportation or rapid content shifts. This reminds me of Flu being able to go from the study to the library or whatever. Offer X-ray vision to deal with some occlusion problems so you can see through things. Provide, and you see how we like keep this in the context of like a real world thing. Like X-ray vision is what we think like Superman has, but it's still a concept that we kind of put our hands around. Okay. Yes.
Provide like an example of
So for instance, if you're walking in an environment and it makes sense to be able to like see something within a forest and like go ahead and click there's a button you can push and you can actually see through the trees. That's kind of like X-ray vision. Yes. Yes. Right. So being able to kind of use your X-ray supervision to see, okay, what's on the inside. Be able to do maybe a task of some sort. I don't play video games anymore, so it's hard for me to come up with a real video game. Go ahead.
In all the video games, depending on where the camera is, the camera might be inside a building, so they just put you through the wall so they can enter the building, because that would be bad to show you a wall and not the character.
Right. So they do things like that to handle some of the inclusion problems. Okay. Provide history keeping, so being able to replay or undo certain actions. Enable remote collaboration, being able to have multiplayer in different areas. Giving user control over explanatory text on demand, so being able to get kind of that quick help if a novice user needs it. Allow users to quickly filter out unneeded items. I don't play video games, so this one's hard for me to come up with an example for. Like, I know if you have inventory, you can drop inventory and stuff like that, but, right? Okay, yeah, so people like to just unclutter Nathan. Right, so like in Photoshop, you can have different layers, and Photoshop's a great tool for direct manipulation, because like you can actually like piece the layers and layer them and move them up and down on the Z-axis. Okay. Support zooming and movement to give more details, like being able to zoom in on something not only to see it bigger, but also to see, you know, the different properties related to it. And then provide landmarks in multiple views. So like he was saying, be able to have different camera focus on different places. There's also uses, so like on all of those examples, we were thinking about video games, right? But they actually use this in teleoperation, where they use direct manipulation to conduct physical process in a remote location for really important stuff, like in space, hostile environments like war, underwater, within telemedicine. Doctors are actually doing remote telemedicine operations on people. And so all of these things use direct manipulation to try to make the environment more realistic to the user, where the surgeon's not doing a menu saying, menu, like, slice skin, menu, like, this, you know, they're actually going in and, like, doing the manipulation on the person. However, there's some challenges to this. Time delays, incomplete feedback, there's power outages, and you're pretty much screwed, right? And unanticipated interference, right? Okay. There's also virtual reality, which is a simulated, which is an augmented 3D environment where the user is teleported or transported to a different place to interact within an environment. This is often in a first-person situation and enhanced with other effects, like for flight simulators to be able to do the actual movements. The benefits of this is reducing potential risks of doing the actual virtual reality environment in real life. For instance, they use this for people who are trying to get over a fear of heights. It's much better if the person falls off of a fake mountain than they do a real mountain, right? And then the entertainment value of being transported to another virtual place is really appealing to those people. There's also augmented reality, where we try to do an overlay on actual places to give more contextual information about them. For instance, being able to do a screenshot of a city to figure out the different amenities that have been tagged in that geolocation would be really cool, right? Or being able to have Google Glass and working on a car engine and it telling you what parts, like for instance, where the heck is my oil cap? I need to put more oil in my car. So being able to have a semi-transparent view that's overlaid over reality, so you can actually have this information become more expert at the task at hand. For instance, if you are a novice and being able to plumb your own sink, because it tells you which spigot and whatever you need to turn on and off. I don't plumb my own sink, evidently. Challenges of this is that it currently requires hardware as apparel, but we're getting very close to this because we have cell phones, right? Here's some guidelines for virtual environments. Most of these are very similar to the ones that we just covered. Some that I'll pull out is that a lot of the virtual environments have to deal with a lot of different inputs and sensations. Like you want to do haptic feedback or motion along with it. What happens when we do motion and virtual reality? What happens to a lot of people? You get sick, especially if the motion's a little bit off from what you're seeing, right? Like one of the flight simulators at Disney. Also, you have to think about things about the social context of the environment. Is it a collaborative environment or a competitive environment? A lot of video games are more on the competitive side, right? But we've been moving more towards collaborative technologies. These people want to work together, not necessarily against each other. So, yeah, go ahead and read about all of these in the book. And it comes up with some pretty cool, novel things about virtual reality, and maybe this is a field that you'll be interested in the future. And so this is actually, I think, the last chapter that we're going to cover on the interaction modalities. And so the next chapter we're going to cover in the book is more about evaluation, which is what you're going to need to know how to do to be able to evaluate each other's prototypes. Okay? So here